One of the best known and loved stories coming out of the Civil War is the story of William Scott. Young William Scott was a soldier from Vermont who slept at his post while on sentry duty. This is what happened. He'd taken the place of a sick friend one night, and the very next night was detailed for picket duty himself. He said frankly, "I'm afraid I can't stay awake 2 nights in a row, Sergeant, but if it's my duty, I'll do my best." The next morning, on August 31st, 1861, his relief, sure enough, found him sleeping like a log. For this offense, he was tried and court-martialed, found guilty, and sentenced to be shot or hung by September 9th, 1861. Scott's comrades, the soldiers of the 3rd Vermont Regiment, and his captain set about to save him. They were told that there was only one man on earth who could save their buddy, and that was President Abraham Lincoln. The group went to the White House and in a dramatic way presented a graphic account of Scott's case to the president, ending by saying, "President, he's as brave a boy as there ever was in the whole company, sir. Scott's no coward. Our mountains breed no cowards. Is there anything you can do to help us?" "I can," exclaimed the president. "I do not think an honest and brave soldier conscious of no crime but sleeping when he's weary ought to be shot or hung. The country has better use of them. I will attend to this matter myself. I have for some time intended to go up to the Cane Bridge on the Potomac River. I will do so today and talk to young Scott." The officer apologized for imposing upon the president in such a way, but Mr. Lincoln said, "Don't apologize. Scott's life is valuable to him as any person in the land, even though he's just a private. You remember the story of a Scotsman talking about the head of a nobleman who was about to be decapitated. The Scotsman said, 'It was a small matter of a head, but it was valuable to the poor fellow. It was the only one he had.'" During the day, Abraham Lincoln went to the camp and called for the condemned soldier. Scott afterwards told the story of his interview with the president. He said, "The president was the kindest man I'd ever seen. I knew him at once by a Lincoln medal that I'd long worn. I was scared at first, for I'd never been or talked with a great man. But Mr. Lincoln was so easy with me, so gentle. I soon forgot my fright. He asked me about the people at home, my neighbors and my farm, and where I went to school and who my schoolmates were. And then he asked me about my mother and how she looked. I was glad that I could take a photograph from my front pocket, and I showed it to him. And then he said how thankful I ought to be that my mother was still alive, and how it was with his mother. And if he were in my place, he'd try to make her a proud mother, and never cause her sorrow or even a tear. I cannot remember it all, but every word was so kind. He had not said anything yet about my dreadful next morning, and I thought it must be that he was so kind-hearted he didn't want to talk about it. But why did he ask me so many questions about my mother, not causing her a sorrow or a tear, when he knew I must die the next morning? But I supposed it was something that would have to go unexplained. So I determined to brace up and tell him that I did not feel a bit guilty, and asked him if he couldn't just fix it so the firing squad would not be for my own regiment. That was going to be the hardest of all. To die at the hands of my own comrades was more than I could imagine. Well, he looked me in the face, and he stood up, and he said, "My boy, stand here and look me in the face." I did as he told me. He said, "You're not gonna be shot tomorrow. I believe you when you said that you couldn't keep awake that night. I'm gonna trust you and send you back to your regiment. But I've been put to a good deal of trouble on your account. I've had to come up here from Washington when I've got a great deal to do. What I want to know is, how are you gonna pay for my bill? There was a big lump in my throat. I could scarcely speak. You see, I'd expected to die, and it kind of got me by surprise. I didn't even know what to say. But finally I got the lump down, and all I could say is, I'm grateful, Mr. Lincoln. I don't know what to say. I have a savings account, but it's come on all of a sudden like, and I just have to think about that. I got a farm, and I could mortgage that, and maybe some of the fellows here in the regiment would want to help me with their pay. We don't get paid an awful lot, but maybe altogether we could come up with $500 or $600. I'm sorry, but it's a great deal more than that. Then I said, I don't know what to do, but I'm sure I could find a way if you let me live, sir. Then Mr. Lincoln put his hands on my shoulders, and he looked me into the face, and he said, I'm sorry, boy. My bill is very large. Your friends cannot pay it. Your farm cannot pay for it. There's no one in the world that can pay for it except one person, and that's you, William Scott. If from this day, William, you do your duty so that if I was there if you'd happen to die, you could look me in the face and say, as you have just said now, that you do your best. I want you to say that I've kept my promise and I've done my duty as a soldier. You see, Scott, I can't fight, but you can. Then that debt will be paid. You can do what I can't do. Well, I said to him, I promise with God's help, I'll do my best. I wanted to tell him other things, but I just didn't know what to say. It was so difficult just talking to him, standing in his presence. He went away out of my sight forever. I know I shall never see him again, but may God forgive me if I ever forget the kind words that he promised. William Scott was released from duty with his regiment. In 2 engagements, he performed the most exposed service with bravery. 7 months later, with his company, he charged at Lee's Mill. You should have seen him in action. Near the last of the battle, he was carrying his wounded buddies across a river when 6 enemy bullets entered his body. He was carried out of the line of fire and laid on the grass to die. Later, he was placed in a cot in his tent. Just before daylight the next morning, the word was passed that Scott wanted to see his buddies. They gathered around his cot, and he said, "Boys, I shall never see another battle. I've tried to do the right thing, haven't I? You can tell him at home about me." While his strength was failing and his life was ebbing away, they looked to see his voice sink into a whisper. But his face lighted up, and his voice came out natural and clear as he said his last words. "If any of you ever have a chance, I wish you'd tell President Lincoln that I've never forgotten the kind words that he said to me at the Cane Bridge. I've tried to be a good soldier and true to the flag in our country. I think of his kind face and thank him again. Thank him for me, because he gave me a chance to fall like a soldier in battle and not like a coward at the hands of my buddies. Goodbye, boys. I'm going on." And with that, he closed his eyes and died. There's a lot that can be said at the end of this devotion, but let me say, we deserve to die, but because of Jesus Christ, we live. We have a much more compassionate Jesus even than Abraham Lincoln was to William Scott. Think about that and talk about it as a family. Why don't you go over some of these scriptures? Romans 3:23, 6:23, and Romans 5:8.